बिनती मेरा नाम बिंदिया
For a little girl like Bindia, trying to collect scrap from garbage heaps, love, care, nurturing, these are all impossible. There's really no hope.
मुझे पिट्ठू खेलना पसंद है मेरा नाम भावना है बड़े के डॉक्टर
Bhavana is 7 years old. She has a secure home. She has a place to study. She has parents who want to make sure that she reaches her fullest potential. A girl like Bhavana will work hard and one day her dreams might come true. Slums form about 1/3 of the city's population. There's a lot of exploitation, there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of corruption. People have no hope. They will say that God has forgotten us because if He did remember us, then we wouldn't be living like animals. In 1988, there was a cholera epidemic in the city. Hundreds and hundreds of children began to die.
डॉक्टर किरण यहाँ पर जैसे ही उन्होंने शुरुआत करी तो बच्चों से बड़ा प्यार करती थी.
This is where I started Asha, under this very tree. And I used to sit here and I used to see hundreds of patients just out in the open. In those days there was slush and mud everywhere, flies, mosquitoes, pigs.
तो बीमारी इतनी बढ़िया तरीके से दवाई उन्होंने दी. अब डॉक्टर किरण जिस बच्चे को दवाई देती थी वो बच्चा ठीक हो जाता था. हमारा प्यार.
पहले हम उन पर विश्वास नहीं करते थे लेकिन लोगों ने जब देखा कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा हमारे को सहायता करना चाहती हैं तो फिर धीरे धीरे विश्वास आया.
This kind of radical change requires sustained effort. Unless I was willing to stick it through, there would be no real hope for the people. To me, the word hope is a very real word. It's a word that has come alive in Asha. Never has there been a situation when slum children are going to university.
I've grown up in the slum. I'm doing electronics and communication engineering. Hope is something you dream about. Hope was Asha for me.
महिला हमारे यहाँ पर है. जब डॉक्टर किरण ने शुरुआत करी तो सूरज महिला एक संस्था बनाई. सूरज महिला संस्था के थ्रू
The work of empowerment means to mobilize them, to help them to understand their rights, but also their responsibilities. Once they realize what their collective action is able to do, then they really get excited. Thousands of women have been empowered. They've been able to transform entire communities.
अभी भविष्य में इतना बढ़िया होने जा रहा है इसलिए महिलाओं को ज़्यादा महत्व दिया गया है.
नर्क से स्वर्ग में आ गए हैं और हमारा जीवन एक मिडिल क्लास लोगों का जैसा जीवन हो गया. अब हम झुग्गी वाले लोग नहीं रहे.
Yes, I know that we have a long way to go. There's a lot more to be done. But the hope and the desire is that many millions of urban poor in India and around the world receive hope. They don't have to live in abject poverty, and there are wonderful ways in which they can actually come out of it. Thank you so much, Mark, for your kind introduction and for arranging this lovely lunch. Also want to thank all the members of the Melbourne Press Club and everybody here who's taken the time to come and hear the story of Asha. Want to also recognize Richard, who is the secretary of the Melbourne Press Club, and many of his colleagues from CORES who are here tonight, this afternoon, to support this effort. And I was really delighted to meet Susan Cole from DFAT. I didn't realize that DFAT had a presence in Melbourne. But we work very closely with DFAT in both in Canberra as well as in Delhi. So it's really wonderful to have you here and all of you as well. So let me show you some pictures and give you a brief glimpse of the story of Asha. And then, of course, we can have some questions later. So that's a typical slum in the city of Delhi. You might know that there are 16 million people or so living in this very prosperous city in India. It's got the highest per capita income. So a quarter of them live in these sorts of shanty colonies that are seen everywhere by railway tracks or right next to five-star hotels or right in the center of extremely wealthy neighborhoods. I guess 4 million is the approximate population of Melbourne, is that right? That's the number of people living in the slums of Delhi. This is just a closer look at what a shanty hut looks like. Being a pediatrician and coming from a middle-income family, I had lived in Delhi for so many years, but I'd never really gone inside one of these to see what it looked like. And as you can see, it's nothing but plastic, discarded material, small tents, no windows, no doors, nothing. And even the cooking just goes on outside, sometimes inside. And that's all the space that a family of 7 or 8 or even 10 might have to live. These dirty drains are very common. They run through entire slums, they run through the center, they run through the sides, and it's very common to have hundreds of shanty huts that are sort of that are set up along these drains. And you can just about imagine why the infant mortality was 100 for every 1,000 live births, with children dying of diarrheal illness, respiratory illness, complications related to measles, and the prevalence of tuberculosis was also very high when I first went in. So that's a malnourished child weighing much below what it should be weighing for his age. And every child in the slum was malnourished when I started. There wasn't a single healthy child that would happily play on the streets. They were sick almost all the time. And you saw in that video that tree under which I sat and started my work with a case of medicines that I had from friends and other well-wishers. Can you imagine that because these children were so malnourished and because there was such a huge prevalence of diarrheal illness and dehydration, I would be giving them intravenous fluids right there under that tree. I would put a nail in the wall and do it just because they were so severely dehydrated and they didn't want to go to the hospital. Now, believe it or not, that's me in the year 1988, and I'm actually in conversation with the Member of Parliament for South Delhi. This was a slum in an area called R.K. Puram in the southern part of the city, and he was going to go away from the periphery after inaugurating a toilet complex, but I somehow persuaded him to come inside to show him what the conditions were like, and that's me actually seeing him off after he did a round of the slum and promised to bring about improvements as a result of coming in. And this little girl in my arms is my older daughter. She was just about 1.5 years old. In fact, she wouldn't believe that this picture existed. When I would tell her that, when you were that old, I would take you with me and you would play around with those slum kids while I would be talking to people and to the residents, and she went like, Mom, it doesn't sound real. And when I showed her the picture, she went like, Mom, really? That's so true. Is that really me? I said, yeah, it is you. And the delightful thing is that she got married about 2 weeks ago. Just to give you a little glimpse of our healthcare model, you did see it in the video, so I won't take too long on it. But the healthcare model it's not just a service delivery program, it's about giving the power of healthcare into the hands of the people themselves. So for every 300 families, we have a community health volunteer. You see these lovely women who are actually illiterate, but Asha has been able to train them to deliver primary health care. They live right there in the slum, and they're able to treat most of the common ailments as well as offer really good advice to their peers. We've got a number of doctors and other nurse practitioners working now. In those early years, it was me alone seeing patients, but as time has gone on, there's so many wonderful medical professionals that have joined me. And as Mark mentioned, we are looking after 700,000 slum residents in the city. And I've been able to tap into the public hospitals and other tertiary care systems in the city. Delhi being the capital has a lot going on, and it's about trying to build bridges. And so there are many public hospitals whose doctors come in, like this one, to provide eye care services, for example, and take them to hospitals to do cataract surgeries. It might be for general surgeries. It might be for MRIs or CAT scans. So because otherwise this population has absolutely no access to good quality diagnostic services or tertiary care. These are the wonderful women whose picture you saw earlier in that video. And they were completely on the fringes of society, completely on the margins. They had absolutely no voice whatsoever, neither at the family level nor at the community level, in society at large. And they always had their veils over their faces, and I would struggle to even talk to them. Like when they would come to me as a patient, I would say, can you just lift your veil so I can see your face? It was a different life they led. And we had the slum lords, and we had the slum mafia, and we had all the forces of exploitation. And while I would encourage them to come and sit in the meetings, they always saw me as a threat. And there have been times when, if I was meeting with a group of women like this, they would lock me into my room. I mean, imagine locking us all into the center and not allowing us to go home. That was the extent of the threat that they experienced, because they were also earning quite a lot through their activities in the slum. And my whole approach was not to become enemies with them or not to alienate them, but to help to include them in the process of development so that they didn't feel insecure and they didn't feel that they were being ignored. And so there was a non-confrontational peacemaking approach to the slum lords. In the beginning it didn't work, but later on it was amazing, the wonders it worked. In fact, you saw the first slum lord in that video. You might remember him. He was standing there and he was talking about, he had the microphone in his ears. He was such a difficult person. I mean, so many times when I thought I could never continue my work, there was once a big foundation stone that arrived to inaugurate a wonderful land rights program in his community. And he didn't want the land rights because he felt that slum dwellers will not need him anymore. So when the foundation stone arrived, just before the governor was going to come and inaugurate the program, he and about 10 other men came and broke that foundation stone into 1,000,000 pieces. And there was complete mayhem in the slum. And I had to run and I had to ring up the office of the governor and say, I don't think this is a good time for the governor to come here because I just cannot predict what's going to happen. They might stone him. They might, deflate his car tires. I don't know what they'll do. So it's better you don't come. And it was so difficult, and I was so scared. I was about 29 years of age, and I'm going like, what's all this going on? How am I ever going to tackle these slum lords? This is just one story, but there are so many other stories that happened in the years to come. But I'm so happy to tell you that we now have thousands of women who've been empowered, like you see in this picture. And I'll just show you a few pictures of what they've been able to achieve. It's taken a long time, but look at this. Look at this dirty toilet on the left side and this wonderful, clean public toilet block on the right side. Now, Asha never spent the money for this. The women didn't spend the money for it. The government spent the money. So these women have become very good at petitioning their causes. And through their collective action, they understand that you might need to go to the local councillor. You might need to go to the local MLA. Or you might need to go to the federal minister or your member of parliament. It just depends on what the situation is. And they've become wonderful champions, wonderful advocates, wonderful community leaders, and they have such a good spirit about them. They just do not give up no matter what. And this is a classic example of their empowerment. There were these bulldozers just before the Commonwealth Games approaching the slum from all sides. I mean, who can stand up against these huge bulldozers? They mercilessly razed the entire slum to the ground without giving any notice, because they knew that if they gave notice, the slum dwellers would collect and do something about it. And we all stood there helpless. But the women said, we are not going to give up. And I said, if you're not going to give up, even I'm not going to give up. And together, all these women and the Asha team and myself, we went and met Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's office. In those days, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi was the president of the Congress party, and the Congress was in power at the time. And we went and petitioned. And it's a really long story, and it happened because the Commonwealth Games were going to happen in 2006, and they wanted to clear that area for building lots of infrastructure without doing anything in compensation, which was against the law. And, but you can see on the right, they've got this beautiful colony in which they live. And now, of course, they're well connected to public transport and to banks and to employment and all the rest of it. So it requires a great deal of persistence, a great deal of passion and energy and drive to be able to understand your democratic rights, your citizenship, and your collective action and the power that it can hold. We have a very large financial inclusion program that I'm not going to go into in detail, but just to say that there was a time when every single slum family would put their money under mattresses. That was their favorite location, under a mattress, or inside a pillow cover, or in a dilapidated cupboard in some corner. Or women, if they wanted to hide the money from their husbands, they would put it in steel containers under the lentils, you know, where they store lentils in a steel container. That's very common in India. And that's how they were. They were completely unbankable. They were financially illiterate. They had no idea whatsoever what it means to enter a bank. I worked with the finance minister of the day. That was something I had to do with the federal government. And as a result of that, the very first financial inclusion program for the urban poor was launched in the year 2008. And today we have so many residents we are working with. Each one has a bank account, including the students, including Chandan. And in fact, it was amazing when I brought this picture up yesterday at course, because Chandan goes, I know this guy, he's from my slum. So, and I went like, that's amazing that, you know, I didn't know that he was from your slum, but he used to ride a rented auto rickshaw, which is what we call these vehicles. Tuk-tuks in Thailand, auto rickshaws in India. And, but then because he got a bank loan from a bank, a public sector bank, not from an Asha bank, not from a Grameen type bank that Asha is running. It was a regular nationalized bank in India. And he was able to buy another auto rickshaw, he was able to buy other commercial vehicles, and now you can see the results of how his life has got completely transformed. So he's one example of hundreds and hundreds of slum dwellers being able to have access to finance. And these two wonderful boys are live examples of what the education program has done. But just wanted to say that every morning when I would walk through the access way into the slum, I would see these kids rummaging in garbage, looking for metal, looking for plastic, anything that they could find that they could recycle and just earn a few rupees from what they were doing. And I'm happy to report this wonderful picture that you see on the right side, where these girls, not just the boys, but also the girls, you know, who were otherwise put to work at home or outside, are all going to school. And as Mark said, hundreds of thousands of them are going to school. And after school hours is amazing, and Chandan will tell you more about what the children do when they come after school hours. They discuss, they have a president, they talk about how they're going to petition the authorities, they have fun, they play games rather than playing in the dirty drains. I mean, you know, kids love to play, so I would see them take sticks and play in those dirty drains. And so they come to Asha centers and learn computers and so on. In 2008, we sent the very first cohort of slum children to Delhi University. Imagine that. I mean, I thought it would happen in another lifetime, not my lifetime. But I found that it happened. And Delhi University is so competitive. Now, I was talking to Mark's lovely wife and her friend, Kritika. Kritika is from the city of Dehradun in India. And she was telling me about her sister who studies in a college called Venkateshwar College. And isn't it remarkable that Chandan, who's here today, Chandan, can you raise your hand so everyone can see you? He went to the same college as Kritika's sister. Now, that's what equality is all about. That's what finding your place in the world is all about. And it was just so exciting that as time went on, more and more students started going to university. And at this point, like Mark said, we are going to touch this dream of 3,000, because we're already at 2,600, and these are going to all the different colleges at Delhi University. I know that there was somebody was talking about Miranda House over here. There are students going to Miranda House. For anybody who knows the different colleges under Delhi University, there's hardly a college where you will not find Asha students. And last night we released this student record. Actually, it was released by Richard himself, which is a matter of great honor for us at an event, a cocktail event at Coors. And I'll leave the book with you, and you can go through it. it's a wonderful record starting from 2008 onwards of all the students who have either graduated or who are still at university. So feel free to have a look at this book whenever you have a moment. Mahinder, may I please request you to come here? Because you need to see whether you can do some recognizing over here. You see the boy on the left? That's him. Mahinder's journey is absolutely remarkable. I'm just going to leave him to tell you the story, but I met him when he was barely 6 or 7 years of age. And he joined the Children's Association, and we walked on this absolutely delightful journey where he has inspired me no end, and he's been one of my greatest inspirations and my greatest heroes, and has encouraged me to continue on and persevere in my efforts and have this great vision of now reaching out to every single slum child in the capital of India. Thank you, Mahinder. Thank you. That's him graduating from the University of Melbourne. In fact, Robert is here. He was the commencement speaker. Robert, are you here somewhere? Where are you? Can I see you? There he is. He was the speaker for the ceremony, and Jim McCluskey was also there, as were a number of others, and it was a matter of so much pride and so much joy for me to come for his graduation and see the very first slum child from India. There are 120 million slum dwellers in India. The very first child from the slums of India to go to a foreign university and to graduate from there. I think Australia can be so proud. I think we should give a big hand to Australia. And what a fine example Australia has set. Because the moment Australia did this, the United Kingdom said, well, if they can do it, so can we. And I will shortly have Chandan up to be able to tell you how he ended up with an amazing journey and is going to go to the United Kingdom to do his master's. This is just a quick story about this lovely girl called Sonam. And I'm telling you because we have this whole idea of paying it forward so that it's no longer an organizational effort, but it becomes a movement. And that the kids who either graduated, who are still at university, can fan out over the whole city, look for new slums, look for bright children, bring them to the Asha hubs, and help them get admission, help them and show them the way to university. And Sonam was one such girl. That's her house. That's where she lives in the eastern part of the city. And on the right side, you see her sitting with this beautiful girl called Usha, who is a journalist. The reason why I have the picture is that this is a wonderful press club. You may have heard of the Hindustan Times. Mark, I'm sure you have, and maybe many others have. And Usha works for the Hindustan Times. Isn't that remarkable? And Usha came here about, how long was it? 3 years ago, maybe? And she actually addressed a huge gathering at DFAT in the presence of the Governor General of Australia. And she told her story. And so she decided to mentor Sonam, who said, I want to be a journalist. And imagine Usha said, you know what? I am earning enough. I'm going to pay for her application fees. I'm going to help her through the whole process. So here's Chandan, Sonam and Usha sitting together. And while I was in Australia 3 days ago, I got the news that Sonam has been admitted to one of the finest schools of journalism. Isn't that amazing? So Sonam is going to do TV and radio journalism, and Usha has been her mentor. Now, Tushar is another fine story of how an ambassador can actually go to a new slum and look for other children. So Tushar is not from an Asha slum. He belongs to another slum, entirely different location. And his house is exactly by the railway track. But there was an ambassador from an Asha slum who found him and who brought him along. And I don't know whether it will finally happen, but I'm going to be in conversation with Sydney University when I go to Sydney to have Tushar come here for a master's. That's the Australian High Commission. I just wanted to say that we have a marvelous relationship with the Australian High Commission in Delhi. It's been there for a number of years, and they have opened the doors of internship to our Asha students. And this is a group of students standing with Harinder Sidhu, who is the current Australian High Commissioner, and Rod Hilton, who is the current Deputy Australian High Commissioner, who's taken over from Chris Elstoft, who's now back in Canberra. And it all began with the Australian High Commission. What a marvelous relationship between two countries. It's not just based on trade and making money, but it's based on looking after after some of the poorest sections of society. And I'm so proud of this relationship, which is why I really love Australia so much. And the Australian High Commission paved the way. But just imagine, as a result of that, the British High Commission came on board, the New Zealand High Commission came on board, the French Embassy came on board, the Greece Embassy came on board. I mean, the entire Europe came on board. So I think we should once again give a big hand to Australia for this remarkable initiative. And look at all the jobs. I mean, it's not an easy thing to get a job in Delhi with all the young people vying for jobs. But these are not kids who are doing low-level jobs. They're working for Grant Thornton. They're working for the New Zealand High Commission. In fact, one of the boys just got a job at the Australian High Commission 3 weeks ago. They're working for Macquarie. We have so many people working for Macquarie India. And then, of course, we have Mahinder, who's working for Macquarie Sydney. So this is the scale and quantum of transformation that is possible. It speaks to their need for an opportunity. It speaks to their brilliance. It speaks to their hard work. It speaks to their resilience. It speaks for their strong desire to be integrated into the mainstream of society and to find their place in the world. Lovely Asha ambassadors in their blue t-shirts, Asha t-shirts going from slum to slum, advocating this powerful message of higher education. I won't go to the statistics because Mark already mentioned that the infant mortality has come down from 100 to 16. In fact, the latest figure is 12, which is even more wonderful. That's Prince Edward, the youngest son of the Queen, and he was there to congratulate Asha on its 30th anniversary, which we celebrated just last year. And then on the right, the picture on the right is that of the Prime Minister of Denmark. And the reason why I put the picture up is that it was Australia that introduced us to the Embassy of Denmark. And that's why the Prime Minister of Denmark visited Asha. This is the last picture that I have for you today, and it just talks about the Asha values. There are 10 Asha values. You can have a good look at them on the website if you are interested. But it's all about dignity. It's about gratitude. It's about learning to be generous and to share and offer hospitality. And this is a slum where you have Hindus, you have Muslims, and among the Hindus, you have the Brahmins, you have the warriors, you have the lowest caste, you have the untouchables, and they're all eating together. Now, that is something you would never see if you went into an Indian village or an Indian slum. There's a lot of discrimination on the basis of caste and religion. People do not share each other's food. And I think sharing food is one of the best ways you can say that the caste system has truly broken down. And this work in communal harmony gives me great joy because it symbolizes our common humanity. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story with you today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chandan, and it's a great honor for me to address you all today. This is my first time in Australia, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Next, please. So this is Jeevan Nagar slum colony where I was born and brought up, and I've lived here all my life and was raised in extreme poverty. This is a picture of me when I was 11 years old. My family of 7 members have always lived in this shack that is made up of one small room measuring about 60 square feet. I have this memory of sitting on metal trunk when we were all thrown out of our home one day. I was about 7 years old back then. Our roof is made up of asbestos sheet, and it leaks through the holes and the cracks every year during the rainy season. My bedding, clothes and books all get wet when this happens. The walls are thin and I can easily see through the walls into other homes. Once when I didn't have any space to keep my books, I jammed metal rod through the wall and created a support to balance my books. Next, please. So my home is besides this large open drain, and such open drains run through all my slum. And little children often fall inside, and there are no individual toilets. We all have to use common toilets and stand in line for our turn, and especially during rush hours when it takes really long. Next, please. This is my father. We belongs to the lowest caste in our village, and people belonging to my caste works work as laborers, servants for the wealthy family and landowners in our village. Each group stay in its own caste, and people from one caste never get married into another caste. My father was completely illiterate and came to Delhi in search for work to try and escape from the hardship of poverty. He works in a small shop that does the business of selling bundles of copper wire. When the heavy boxes arrives in the truck from the wholesale market, he offloads them and keeps them in the store every day. My father cycles to work 12 kilometer one way every day, and he has been doing this work for last 34 years, and he earns about $225 per month nowadays. I remember often having Indian bread and sugars to fill my stomach because there was no food at home. Next, please. I first walked into the new Asha center in my slum when I was about 9 years old. I would love coming there after school and getting involved with the activities of our children's group. The center was bright and colorful, and the Asha members were so cheerful, loving and kind. I was then elected to become the president of children's group, and I began to lead the activities of the group in my community. I remember teaching mothers how to make oral rehydration solution for children having diarrhea so that their lives would be saved. I have a beautiful memory of sitting on Dr. Kiran's lap when she visited us one day. I was about 11 years old then. Next, please. So I also learned basic computer education at the Asha computer lab, and that was for the first time when I really touched a computer, and I was so thrilled. Before coming to Asha, I could hardly speak a few words in English. Ever since I became a member of the Asha family, my life has been completely transformed. I was given lots of books and was inspired to study hard. I was amazed when I scored 89% marks in my school leaving exams with 95% marks in mathematics and economics. It was at this time when I began my relationship with Dr. Kiran. And this was the turning point of my life. She became my mentor and guided me every step of the way from then onwards. I took admission in BSc Honours Mathematics at the Sri Venkateshwara College, one of the top and prestigious colleges of the University of Delhi. And I was the first person in my family and my community to ever go to university. I would see the students from rich families coming in their cars, and they would always have plenty of money while I had very little in my pocket. But Dr. Kiran would always encourage me and telling me that my worth and the value was the same as theirs, and we are all children of God, loved by God and equal in His eyes. I topped my mathematics in the second year of my bachelor's and was able to gain the respect and admiration from my professors and my peers. Then I graduated with an honors degree in mathematics, scoring overall 91% marks with 100% in algebra and analysis. Next, please. During my college years, I also received the chance to work at Macquarie Global Services under Asha's internship program. I worked there in the Trading Finances Asia team, and it was a wonderful experience. This was for the first time when I entered in a professional setup. I learned several skills related to working in a professional environment. The stipend I received during my internship was almost equal to that of my father's income. And I still remember his face when I handed over the stipend to him. Next, please. By this time, I had already decided that I wanted to go into academia. Under Dr. Kiran's mentorship and with Asha's financial support, I was able to complete a thought master's degree in mathematics from University of Delhi. My parents cannot pronounce the name of my college and have no idea what I am studying. But they know I'm doing well and they are proud of me. I am a senior Asha student promoting the higher education program in the slums so that many Chandans like me one day stand before you, totally transformed. I received this wonderful opportunity to apply for a research scholarship in mathematics at ANU in Canberra through Asha. I was thrilled when I was accepted among so many applicants. And that is how I am here before you today. So, last year I applied to universities in the UK for a master's in pure mathematics with the help of Dr. Kiran. And I'm delighted to share that these are the universities from where I have received offers. Next, please. And I've chosen to go to the Imperial College London and will begin my master's there in September of this year. I've been awarded this prestigious and rare Chevening scholarship by the British government for my master's, and this scholarship will cover my tuition fees and all other expenses. At the end, I would like to thank the people of Australia from the bottom of my heart for supporting young people like me at ASA for last so many years, and we shall be grateful to you. There are so many slum children who would like to follow in my footsteps, and I hope we can continue to receive your support and blessings for them. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story with you today. Thank you.
All right, as I said, we don't have a lot of time, so I might move straight away to the room if people have questions that they'd like to ask of anyone on our panel today. So David has a roving microphone. If you wish to ask a question, please, if you do, say who you are. Otherwise, I'll have to ask all the questions. Okay. Thank you again for your presentations. Kiran, the record of what you've achieved in this period is impressive, and a remarkable statistics of the achievements you've had in health, education and empowerment of communities. How big a difference clearly you've made a huge difference to the lives of all of those individuals, but how big a difference do you think you've been able to make in terms of the overall challenge of poverty and inequality in India?
I do realize that
You're
the
welcome
scale...
to sit if you wish to.
Okay, maybe we should all sit down.
Yes.
Huh?
Except for me.
I do realize that the scale of poverty is huge, and like I mentioned, the 120 million urban poor in India. But I think that we've made a very substantial impact, not just in terms of numbers, but by presenting a model whereby governments are convinced that things need to be done for this population. And governments are convinced both at the federal level as well as at the local level. So to give you an example, when we did the land rights program, which I showed you, it became a part of government policy subsequently. And the Delhi government decided that they would divide the slum into three parts, slums into three categories. And there would be that category of slum residents who would definitely get compensatory land and loan to build houses if their slums were ever demolished. So now that was a wonderful development that affected slum dwellers citywide. The financial inclusion program. The finance minister of India himself, in those days it was one, Mr. P. Chidambaram, whom you may have heard of. He said that if you are able to show success, I will roll it out to the entire nation, which is what he did. And so there are so many different elements of the program that have gone nationwide or citywide. And I'm convinced that the higher education program, which is a pioneering effort, when hundreds of thousands of children will get into university, I feel sure that the nation will follow.
Good. One question here.
Hi, Kira. I was fortunate enough to visit you with your good friend Harish Rao here in 2012. And you were very welcoming, but what we took away from it is it was quite an experience. You took us through on a tour, and the energy there was fantastic. I would assume that you still welcome visitors. Perhaps you can discuss sort of how people can come and visit you and what the experience is like for
Oh,
others.
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. That's really wonderful that you were able to come and visit firsthand. We encourage it a lot. We think that it's one of the very important objectives of Australian Friends of Asha to be able to have these forms of exchanges and immersion activities. And so if you would like to visit Asha, you would be extremely warmly welcomed. Please do come. The only thing I would caution you against is the bad weather in the summer. Right now it's about 44 degrees Celsius, so this is not a good month. But right from October until March, it's fabulous weather in Delhi. And you know, you can get in touch with Richard. He will be able to direct you to Asha. And we have an entire communications team at Asha that will be able to correspond with you and set up a visit. So I would encourage you, you can come as individuals, you can come in teams, you can also come to volunteer. So if you are doctors or you have, you know, skills in finance or any of the areas that I described, your volunteering skills would be very warmly welcomed at Asha. The Australian Friends of Asha website is Australian Friends of Asha for slums.org.au.
Yeah, I've got a question for Chandan and Mahinda, Mike Osborne from AAP. I'd be fascinated to know what your friends say when you go back to the slums and the children that you would have grown up with, played with back then, and to see what you've made of your lives now. I'd be interested to hear what your friends are saying.
I think my friends had no idea. My friends had no idea. They were really surprised. I am on Facebook, so the first picture I posted, and I got so many likes, and from that I got so many messages, personal messages, and yeah, some of them were very supportive because I told them personally, and because the way I used to dress up while going to uni, till like my bachelor's, I never hardly wore any new clothes. So the way I used to dress up and the way I used to go and carry myself, like not in terms of study, but in terms of like dressing and little bit like the language. My English was also not that good. So they knew like the background little bit, but when it became official and on the Facebook I put a picture. So yeah, they were really surprised, and a lot of them were very they were appreciating me. So yeah.
So in my case, it's slightly different. If I talk about the students from slum community, they are of course really happy that I'm here and I'm studying and I'm doing well. And it is inspiring to them, and I'm lucky that I'm able to do something that they can follow, or maybe they can think that that if one person has already done it, then it's a big hope for the other students too. So when I go back to India, it would be my hard attempt to meet all the young students who have just entered into university, so that they can really think that they can do and they can make change, they can change their life, they can give a big hope to their families, and yes, so that they can change their lives.
I had another question for you, Kiran. What are the biggest obstacles to you these days? You've fought lots of obstacles in terms of the mafia, as you said, and the slumlords and others who didn't want to see people climbing out of their situation that they were profiting from. What are the continuing challenges, the continuing obstacles that you face?
Yeah, so there are so many, and I'll just mention a few. The red tape and the bureaucracy is one of the biggest challenges, and we were talking about it over the table a little while back. But it takes so long to get things done, and you need a lot of patience and persistence and perseverance. I mean, even for one little water pump to be dug, you put in so many petitions and so many applications and so many visits to concerned officials, and sometimes they'll say, this is not my department, go to the other department, and all this, passing the ball, and all this goes on a lot in government circles, so that is sometimes gets really frustrating. But we kind of are very dogged. We don't give up, and we go like, no matter what, we are going to continue to persevere. And the strategy we use is that of non-violence and peacemaking and building relationships and trying to win people over rather than pointing fingers at them, because then it's impossible to get anything done whatsoever. The changing political structures are a huge challenge. So you might make relationships with all the MLAs in the BJP, and suddenly you realize there's a new party that's come, you start all over again. So those are, again, some challenges. And then I think when it comes to tertiary education, this is a conversation that is not happening anywhere, because it's all about primary education. So just for this conversation to become normal, and for governments and NGOs and the private sector, because every time I talk about tertiary education, they go, wow, is this really happening? And I hope that this will become more normal, and I hope that lots of other parties will come forward and be able to pay emphasis on this so that this can go India-wide. That's my really great dream and vision.
Good. Now you will see, or will have seen on your tables, there are forms to donate, and obviously the work of Asha relies entirely on donations as well as volunteerism. So it's a good idea to donate. But can I say, or can I ask you, Kiran, to explain, what can you do with a donation? Now, it can be a relatively small donation, but what could, say, a donation of 50 or 100 Australian dollars do in the hands of Asha?
Absolutely. A small amount of money can go a really long way in India, because of the currency difference. So if you want to train a community health volunteer, it won't cost more than 100 Australian dollars, and get her on the road to being able to take care of 300 families. That's nothing. If you want to just pay for only tuition for a student, it's not more than 200 Australian dollars. Compare that with what you would pay for tuition in this country. If you want to pay for the entire education of a student, which means the tuition, maybe some clothes, some money for travel, and also you need the scaffolding in terms of team members, and you need to be able to have spaces, infrastructure to run workshops, etc. It's just 1,000 Australian dollars for the whole works for one student. And so I've given you a bit of a range, and then there's also newsletters on your tables, and there are also some printed sheets, and they give you more information about every figure and what it can achieve. We also have Hope Givers online monthly donation leaflet, which is lying on your table too. The reason why that is there is that it gives us some regular income security, and we can plan better, and we can understand better approximately how much we think we might be able to get every month. And so if you were inclined at all to sign up for becoming a regular monthly giver, that's fantastic. And that's very easily possible through the Australian Friends of Asha website.
Good. Oh, well. I hope many of you in the room will take up that. I certainly will. So, look, can I thank you again very much for being with us today, Dr. Kiran Martin, Mahinda and Chandan. It's been an extraordinary event. I think, as I said, we do lots of things at the Melbourne Press Club. It's not often we have something that's as powerful and inspiring as this, and thank you for doing that for us today, and best wishes to you both, particularly in the future of your careers, which look like heading to the stratosphere. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming today, and as I say, if you're so inclined, please join us at our lunch next Tuesday. Thank you very much.